By now, I'd been in EastEnders for 3.5 years. Tiffany's storylines were starting to feel tired. I was no longer enjoying being strangled by Ross Kemp every other episode. The variety needed to keep Tiff fresh wasn't there anymore. A lot of different angles had been exploited, so it wasn't surprising to find we were running out of options. I didn't want to leave EastEnders forever. I just wanted to do what all the other old-timers had done when they needed to refresh themselves artistically, which was to have a break and try something different for a while. The next thing I knew, I was being summoned to a meeting with Matthew Robinson. Matthew had not been at Enders long, perhaps a year, but he had made quite an impact with his new rules and punishments. His office was a tiny dressing room, which had once served as a sort of chill-out area for the cast. He commandeered it almost as soon as he arrived so he could remain close to the action. Matthew was a very hands-on individual who liked to know what everybody was up to. I went in during a gap in filming and sat down. "Ah, Martine," he said, "you know your agent has spoken to me. Well, she's raised the issues of how long you want to stay here and what you want to do. I just want to find out from you firsthand how you felt about everything." "Well, Matthew," I began, "my concert at the Albert Hall went brilliantly and led to a few interesting offers. I'd like to have a go at my music, to develop it. So the truth is, I'd really love to leave for a few months, do something different, come back, and hopefully we can all see things for Tiffany in a fresher way. I'm beginning to feel everything's repeating itself. I think a break could do us all good." The meeting was businesslike, and Matthew said he would see what he could do. Excellent, I thought, pausing just before I reached the door to bring up the subject of money and the fact that I was earning a lot less than the other leads. Again, he gave little away. "We'll see," was the best I managed to get from him. I'm not being mean to Matthew because of what happened later. He was just one of those people I couldn't warm to. Perhaps he had a problem with women with strong personalities, I don't know. But I do know I wasn't the only one who wasn't his #1 fan. A week later, I was still waiting to hear, hoping that everything would be sorted out and looking forward to a break and a change of scenery. I was driving to work one morning, listening to a tape and enjoying the fine weather, when the cassette came to an end and the stereo switched automatically to the radio. I was quite near Elstree when the familiar voice of Heart 106.2 FM breakfast show host John O'Coleman came through the speakers. "We cannot put up with it," he roared. "We've got to have a march, a demonstration. We've got to all march up to Elstree. That'll sort it out." My ears pricked up as I thought, what's one of our lot done now? I turned up the radio to make sure I didn't miss any juicy gossip. "I'm sorry," Jono continued, sounding surprisingly serious. "If you've just tuned in and are wondering what we're all talking about, take a look at the front page of the papers today. Tiffany Mitchell, the best barmaid the Queen Vic has ever had, is going to be killed off. We cannot stand for this. The BBC must not be allowed to do this." I was stunned. I pulled my purple Vauxhall Tigra over onto the hard shoulder and sat there listening incredulously to the rest of the broadcast. All these voices were racing around my head screaming, "No, no, no, this can't be happening, this is wrong. Something's gone horribly wrong, Martine." I picked up my mobile and started dialing every Elstree extension I could think of, but everybody was out. I tried Mum. She hadn't seen the papers or heard the news on the radio either. I didn't have a clue what was going on, but I had a suspicion that a very big decision had been made for me. I restarted the car and carried on to the studios while Mum got on the blower to Jeanette, who was outraged to the point of exploding. She had spent the previous 2 days calling various BBC executives. Not one of her calls had been returned. Once at the studios, I was surprised to discover there wasn't a single EastEnders executive to be found. Matthew wasn't in his office, and his boss Mal Young couldn't be found either. Nobody, but nobody, could tell me what was going on. The other actors certainly didn't know. Ross was totally bemused by the news, while Barbara, supportive as ever, gave me a cuddle and asked me what I'd been told by the powers that be. "Nothing," I explained. "Only what I heard on the radio this morning." "It's disgusting," Barbara snapped. "Nobody should be treated this way." I couldn't understand why I'd been treated so harshly. I'd always been polite, gracious, on time. I'd never had any drug or drink problems or brought scandal on the show. The worst thing I'd done was work so hard my health had suffered. It took another 2 days of uncertainty before I finally got to see Matthew. I decided not to pull any punches. How come I'm the last person in the country to discover a character I've been so close to for so long was to die? Is this true, Matthew? Matthew just smiled nervously back at me. Well, I wouldn't say it was definitely true, Martine. I wouldn't say that we've got any concrete plans at the moment. It was just an idea we had. Someone must have got hold of the idea and leaked it to the press. He must have thought I'd been born yesterday. Oh, really, Matthew? And just how did that idea get to the press, I asked. By itself? I was making my views pretty clear, judging by how red Matthew's face had got, but he refused to acknowledge anything I was saying. Instead, he said things like, "You know, we have lots of different storylines on the go at any one moment and, well, this may be only one idea, just one of the options." "Yes," I said, "but that should never have been written or discussed without someone, you, letting me know. Only a couple of weeks ago, I told you I just wanted some time off. So what's this all about? Is anything different going to happen with the storyline if I stay? Would I get more money?" Matthew shook his head. "We don't know, Martine," he replied. "We've got lots of changes planned and we've got a few more new families coming in. The honest truth is that we're not quite sure what's going to happen to Tiff." "So you're basically saying to me that unless I put up with the same money, with the same sort of storylines, then Tiff will be killed off?" "Yes," he replied. "Well, it's a possibility." 2 weeks after that meeting, I finally found out what was really going to happen to Tiff. Jeanette and I were invited to Television Centre for a meeting with Matthew and Mal Young. We were made to wait for 15 minutes in reception before being shown into Mal Young's large office. A nice touch, that. Matthew arrived after us with his over-enthusiastic grin spread all over his face. Mal got the ball rolling. "Matthew," he said, "would you like to explain what we're planning as far as the character of Tiff's concerned?" It turned out to be a slow and laborious lecture, with Matthew refusing to give away the end, the bit where we would find out whether Tiff lived or died, until the last minute. It was like slow torture. Eventually, he reached the grand climax. A frost of light snow has landed in the square. Tiff runs out, chasing Grant and her baby. Meanwhile, Frank Butcher is driving over to the Vic. He's only a matter of yards from the pub when Tiff darts out in front of his car and he knocks her to the ground. She lies motionless in the street with blood pouring from the back of her head into the gutter. Matthew stopped, looked at Mal, and then the pair of them looked at me. "That's fine," I said calmly. "It sounds like a great storyline." I was determined not to give the two producers what they wanted, shock and dismay. Jeanette must have read my mind because she was very calm too. "Yes, it'll be great for Martine's exit. Absolutely fantastic, and ties in with everything we wanted." Matthew looked more than a little disappointed. Mal asked me one more time, "Are you sure you're happy with it?" "Of course," I lied. "I'm over the moon. What more could an actress possibly want?" I think the two men were expecting me to be upset, but that's the way it was, and unbelievable as you may think, that's exactly how it happened. They say it takes all sorts to make the world go round. Well, those two were definitely two all sorts. Of course, in my heart of hearts, it hurt dreadfully, but I'd done all my crying weeks earlier when I first heard about Tiff's death on the radio. That evening, I didn't shed any more tears, but I did feel a bit subdued. I put on a brave face as best as I could and met up with Jonathan. In my mind, EastEnders was already over. While all this was going on, my contract with Virgin's Innocent label was being drafted. A good team of lawyers got to work, ploughing through every detail. It was a slow process as I wanted everything to be perfect. I was completely anal about the detail in the contract. I wanted to make sure I had artistic control, and I didn't want my solo singing career to go the same way as the Milan experience. I still had nearly 2 months filming to complete, so those last weeks were spent songwriting at the Metropolis Studios in Chiswick, shooting at Elstree, and dashing off to New York to record. Flying to New York on Friday to record with Tony Moran and then dashing back for EastEnders on Monday morning almost killed me, but I was a driven woman once again. Now I had something to get stuck into. I hit it off with Tony Moran from my very first meeting at the Ivy. He's a very handsome Puerto Rican man who has worked with many of the best, including Janet Jackson, Luther Vandross and Celine Dion. My last EastEnders scenes were filmed on the 6th of November 1998. They threw a little party for me, but there weren't any tears on my part. Steve McFadden unscrewed the brass plaque on my door and gave it to me, which was a bit of a choker, but then he said, "I think you're making a mistake. I don't think you should leave, Martine." Maybe he had forgotten that I didn't really have any choice in the matter. He was very sweet and thought he was saying the right thing, but I was too busy with my music to care. Ben Parker and Jason Hazley, Ben and Jason as they are known professionally, are a formidable partnership. We wrote a lot together, including Tremble, which ended up on the album. We also wrote If Only and my favourite song on the album, Falling Apart, as well as You, Me and Us, which became its title song. The whole of the album was recorded in New York, where I was pretty much based full-time from December through to January 1999, and the longer I spent there, the more fun I had. Matt Goss was around most of the time, and if I wasn't going out with him of a night, I would be hanging around with Tony Moran. When it came to recording Perfect Moment, I had the studio filled with candles and the lights off to help me get in the mood. I wanted it to sound velvety and romantic. It was destined to become one of the wedding songs of 1999, so I knew I had to get the sound absolutely right. Tony completely understood and got the production spot on. As I didn't think I had anyone special in my life, I concentrated on imagining life with an ideal man. I settled on Ethan Hawke, and as I sang each lyric, I fantasised about him coming towards me saying, "Let's get married," all that corny kind of stuff. With work progressing on the album at full tilt, there was no point in returning to Britain for New Year's Eve. Instead, I decided to meet up with my fellow expats in the Big Apple. Matt had tickets to a really posh do at the Mercer Hotel, so I put on this foxy-looking black frock covered in black rhinestones that I'd worn for the Royal Variety Show, where I'd sung They Can't Take That Away From Me to Prince Charles, and hit the town. With the festivities out of the way, it was time to put the finishing touches to the album and shoot my first pop video. We wanted a crisp, cold, romantic feeling, and New York seemed the perfect place to shoot it. I also had some new pictures taken, lovely black and white shots of me wandering around the city. They were very stylish and a million miles away from my old life in EastEnders.